It's 2:47 in the morning. A dimly lit room somewhere in Washington, D.C. A single analyst sits in front of 3 computer screens. Satellite imagery, intercepted communications, fragmented field reports from sources whose reliability is classified. He has just 17 minutes to deliver a recommendation. Not a final conclusion, only a recommendation. Because in this room, certainty never exists. What exists is a pile of incomplete signals, each pointing in a slightly different direction, and a decision that cannot wait for clarity that will never come. He leans forward, takes a breath, and makes the call. That moment you just imagined, the moment between not knowing and deciding anyway, is the most human thing there is. It happens in intelligence agencies. It happens in hospitals. It happens in boardrooms, in kitchens, and in the middle of arguments with people you love. We are all, always, making decisions in the dark. The real question is, are you doing it well? Most people believe that good decisions come from good information. Get enough data, and the right answer will reveal itself. Clarity produces confidence. Confidence produces action. That's a comforting story. It's also almost entirely wrong. Think about the last major decision you made, a career change, a relationship, or a business investment. Ask yourself honestly, did you have complete information? Did you know how it would turn out? Did you even know what you didn't know? Of course not. No one does. The truth is that virtually every significant decision in human history, from military strategies to scientific breakthroughs to personal reinvention, was made under deep uncertainty. Not despite incomplete information, but through it. The real skill isn't waiting for clarity. The real skill is learning to think clearly when clarity isn't available. And some of the most sophisticated thinkers ever trained to do exactly that work in rooms you'll never see, for organizations whose names you may only half recognize. Before we go there, we need to understand what the human mind does when it faces uncertainty. Because the brain hates a vacuum. When you have incomplete information, your mind doesn't say, "I'll wait." It fills the gap automatically and unconsciously. It grabs the nearest available pattern, the most emotionally resonant story, or the explanation that requires the least mental effort. Psychologists call this system one thinking, fast, intuitive, and deeply vulnerable to error. Here's what happens in practice. You receive a fragment of information. Your brain, desperate to resolve the ambiguity, latches on to the first explanation that feels coherent. Not the most probable one, not the most evidenced one, just the first one that fits. This is called anchoring bias. Once your mind grabs that first explanation, every new piece of information gets filtered through it. You start seeing confirmation everywhere. You unconsciously dismiss anything that contradicts it. Your certainty grows, even as your accuracy stagnates. Then there's availability bias, the tendency to overestimate the likelihood of things that are easy to remember or imagine. A dramatic intelligence failure you recently read about makes you overweight the chance of another. A personal trauma makes you see danger in unrelated situations. Or consider attribution error, the way we assume people and organizations act with unified, rational intent, when in reality, they are just as chaotic, divided, and confused as we are. These aren't weaknesses of unintelligent people. They are built-in features of every human brain, including the most brilliant ones. The question is whether you're aware of them operating inside you, or whether they're driving you without you even knowing. Now let's talk about a discipline specifically designed to fight these biases. Professional intelligence analysis, the kind practiced by agencies like the CIA, MI6, Mossad, and their counterparts around the world, is not about gathering secrets. Anyone can gather information. What makes it special is the discipline of interpretation. In the 1970s, a CIA analyst named Richard Heuer developed a systematic approach to thinking about uncertain problems. His work became the foundation of intelligence training worldwide. His core insight was simple yet radical. The problem isn't the lack of information. problem is how analysts process the information they already have. Huor created what is known as Analysis of Competing Hypotheses, ACH. The method feels almost counterintuitive. Instead of building a case around the most likely explanation, you begin by listing every plausible explanation, including the ones that feel uncomfortable or politically inconvenient. Then, and this is the key, you look for evidence that disproves each hypothesis, not evidence that confirms it. This flips the brain's natural default. Instead of seeking confirmation, you actively hunt for contradiction. A hypothesis that survives rigorous attempts to destroy it is far more credible than one simply loaded with supporting evidence. Alongside this, intelligence analysts are trained to express conclusions in the language of probability, not certainty. You will never see a well-written intelligence assessment say X will happen. Instead, you'll see, we assess with moderate confidence that X is likely. Every word in that sentence carries weight. The language itself becomes a tool for maintaining epistemic humility. Most importantly, analysts are trained to maintain multiple working hypotheses, holding several possible explanations in mind at the same time, without the discomfort of premature closure. The human brain finds this deeply uncomfortable because we crave certainty. Intelligence training is, in many ways, training yourself to tolerate not knowing while still taking action. Theory is clean, reality is not. Let's look at what happens when these principles break down. The history of intelligence failures is largely the history of cognitive bias running unchecked under pressure. In 1961, the Bay of Pigs, President Kennedy and his advisors approved a CIA-backed invasion of Cuba to overthrow Fidel Castro. The entire plan rested on one central assumption that the Cuban people would rise up and join the invaders as soon as they landed. That assumption was never rigorously tested. Dissenting voices were sidelined. The decision-making group fell into what psychologist Irving Janis later called groupthink, a collective narrowing of the mind where social cohesion creates intellectual blindness. The invasion ended in catastrophic failure. The core assumption was never even close to reality. Then came the 2003 Iraq WMD assessment, perhaps the most studied intelligence failure in modern history. The conclusion that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction was delivered with high confidence was wrong. Later investigations showed that analysts had started with a prior assumption that Saddam Hussein must be hiding something and built their case backward from there. Ambiguous data was treated as confirmation. Contradictory signals were discounted. The failure wasn't due to lack of intelligence. It was a profound failure of the interpretive process. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 stands in sharp contrast. For 13 days, President Kennedy and his ex-com team steered the world back from the brink of nuclear war. What made the difference was how Kennedy deliberately structured the decision-making process. He encouraged dissent. He left the room during discussions so advisors could speak freely. He demanded that every assumption be challenged and every option explored. When the Soviets sent two contradictory messages, one conciliatory and one aggressive, his team made the unconventional choice to respond to the softer one and ignore the harder one. It worked. Under the most extreme pressure imaginable, the probability-based multiple hypothesis approach held firm. 3 events, 2 failures, 1 survival. The difference came down almost entirely to the quality of thinking, not the quantity of information. Here is the paradox of modern decision-making. We have more information than ever before, yet we are not necessarily making better decisions. In fact, there is strong evidence we are making worse ones. The human brain's working memory can hold roughly 7 items at once, give or take 2. Beyond that point, something strange happens. Instead of improving accuracy, more information reduces it. More data doesn't clarify, it paralyzes. Psychologists call this analysis paralysis or cognitive overload. But intelligence analysts face an even sharper problem: information noise. In any complex situation, Only a small fraction of the available data is true signal, meaningful, reliable, and relevant to the decision. The rest is noise. The challenge is that noise and signal often look identical in real time. Intelligence training tackles this through ruthless filtering. Analysts are taught to ask about every piece of information. What would this data look like if it were false? If someone wanted to deceive me, would they plant exactly this kind of evidence? It's this single question, imagining what a good forgery would look like, is one of the most powerful tools for clear thinking. The practical takeaway for all of us is simple. More information is not always better. The real skill is not consuming everything. The real skill is knowing what to ignore. Decision-making is not a one-time event. It is a loop. The best intelligence analysts and the best decision-makers in any field treat every outcome as data, not as a verdict on their intelligence or worth, but as information that updates their mental model. This is called a feedback loop. And building a conscious one is one of the most powerful things you can do to improve your thinking over time. The loop works like this. You observe a situation. You interpret it through your current mental model. You make a decision based on that interpretation. The world responds. You observe the response, and crucially, you ask, was my interpretation accurate? What did I get wrong? What did I fail to account for? Most people naturally skip that last step. Good outcome, we credit our judgment and move on. Bad outcome, we blame circumstances and move on. Either way, the model never updates. The bias remains. The error repeats. Elite analysts keep a decision journal, a written record of their reasoning behind major assessments, recorded before the outcome is known. This protects them from hindsight bias, the almost universal tendency to believe after the fact that you knew it all along. Hindsight bias destroys learning. It makes us feel smarter than we actually are, so we invest less in improving the process. The journal breaks that cycle. You read what you actually thought, not the edited version your memory creates for self-protection. The best thinkers in the world are not the ones who are right most often. They are the ones who update fastest when they are wrong. We also have to talk about something intelligence training tries to manage but can never fully eliminate: emotion. Fear, pride, urgency, the desire to be right, the dread of being responsible for a catastrophic mistake. These are not background noise in high-stakes decisions. They are powerful forces that reshape perception itself. Under time pressure, the brain narrows its focus. Peripheral information drops away. Options collapse. Your available thinking space physically shrinks. This is an evolutionary adaptation for physical threats. Run or fight now. But in today's complex, uncertain decisions, strategic, financial, or relational, that narrowing is harmful. These threats require exactly the broad multiple hypothesis, thinking that stress destroys. That is why sophisticated decision frameworks include deliberate decompression protocols, planned pauses, mandatory sleep before major decisions, and structured devil's advocate roles that force consideration of alternatives even when every instinct screams for closure. There is also a subtler distortion: ego investment. Once you publicly commit to a position, the psychological cost of changing it rises sharply. Good analysts are trained to detach their identity from their assessments. They can say my last assessment was wrong without it feeling like an existential threat. That ability to be wrong without losing your self-image is rarer and far more valuable than simply being right. The practical question is not how to remove emotion from decision-making. That's impossible, and some emotional engagement is necessary for values-based reasoning. The real question is how to recognize when emotion is distorting your perception, and how to create structural conditions that reduce that distortion before it matters. Everything we've discussed, analytical frameworks, probability language, competing hypotheses, and feedback loops, is not reserved for people with security clearances. These tools were built for human cognition, which means they work wherever human cognition operates. Consider a business decision. You're thinking about a major strategic pivot. The natural instinct is to build a case for why it will succeed and look for validation. The intelligence approach is different. What are all the plausible ways this could fail? Build those hypotheses in detail. Search for data that would disprove your assumption. If you can't find any, if every data point seems to confirm your plan, that is a warning sign, not reassurance. Think about a relationship. You've interpreted someone's behavior as hostile or dismissive. The anchoring instinct is to collect more evidence that supports that story. The intelligence approach asks, what are the alternative explanations? What would I expect to see if my interpretation were wrong? Am I filtering reality through an emotional prior? Think about a career choice. You're under pressure to decide quickly. That time pressure itself narrows your perception and eliminates options you haven't fully evaluated. Even a brief, deliberate pause, a structured decompression, expands the cognitive space available to you. The principle remains the same in every case. You are always working with incomplete information. The question is whether you recognize that, account for it, and build thinking processes designed for it, instead of pretending the clarity you want is the clarity you actually have. Every decision you make follows the same cycle. It begins with perception, the raw data coming from the world. This is never neutral. What you notice, what you measure, what you even think to look for, all of it is already filtered by your prior beliefs, your attention, and your emotional state. From perception, you move to interpretation, the construction of meaning. This is where bias operates most powerfully. The brain fills gaps, selects narratives, and creates a sense of understanding that may or may not match reality. Interpretation leads to decision, committing action or resources in one direction rather than another. Even inaction is a decision. Decision leads to outcome, the world's response to what you did. Outcomes are rarely clean confirmation or clean refutation. They are messy, partial, and often ambiguous enough to be read in multiple ways. Outcome leads to feedback, but only if you allow it. If you keep a journal, do the post-mortem, and ask the uncomfortable questions, the feedback updates your model. Perception sharpens. Interpretation improves. The entire cycle rises to a higher level. If you skip the feedback, the loop breaks. You repeat the same errors while telling yourself you're learning from experience when you're actually just repeating the same mistake. This loop, perception, interpretation, decision, outcome, feedback, is not a theory of intelligence analysis. It is a description of how human cognition actually works. The only real question is whether you are running it deliberately or unconsciously. There is a reason the most consequential decisions in history were made by fallible people working from incomplete pictures and often getting things catastrophically wrong. It is the same reason the most important decisions in your life will be made under the same conditions. Uncertainty is not a malfunction of reality, it is reality. The belief that enough analysis will eventually produce certainty that somewhere, with enough data, the fog will finally lift, is one of the most persistent and dangerous cognitive illusions we have. What replaces it is something harder and ultimately more powerful: the ability to assess probabilities honestly, to hold multiple explanations simultaneously without premature closure, to update your beliefs as new information arrives, and to act with calibrated confidence rather than false certainty. The intelligence analysts who got things right were not the most confident people in the room. They were the most honest about what they didn't know. Their confidence was not in their conclusions, it was in their process. That distinction matters enormously. Confidence in conclusions makes you brittle. When the conclusion proves wrong, the entire structure collapses, and often the person who built it does too. Confidence in process makes you resilient. A good process that produces a wrong answer can examine itself, find the error, and improve. A wrong answer born from overconfidence has nowhere to go. The analyst sitting in that room at 2:47 in the morning, the one we began with, is not certain. He knows he can never be certain. What he has, if trained well, is a structured way of not knowing. A rigorous, disciplined, documented method for operating in the dark. That is the skill. That is what separates people whose decisions improve with time from those whose decisions age badly. Not certainty, not information. Process. The most dangerous words in decision-making are not, "I don't know." The most dangerous words are, "I'm sure." Because the person who is sure stops looking, they stop updating, they stop questioning. The world keeps changing around them while their mental model, frozen in false certainty, falls further and further behind. The person who knows they don't know and who builds that acknowledgement into the architecture of their thinking never stops getting better. Uncertainty is not your enemy. It is your operating environment. Every decision of consequence you will ever make will happen inside it. The question is not how to escape it. The question is how to become fluent in it. Think in probabilities, not certainties. Hold hypotheses, not conclusions. Build feedback, not just outcomes. And when the pressure rises, time compresses, and every instinct screams for a simple answer. Remember that the simple answer is usually the one your brain is constructing to comfort itself, not the one the evidence actually supports. The world needs people who can think clearly in the dark. You are learning to become one of them. If this made you think differently about how you process uncertainty, share it with someone who makes decisions, which is everyone you know. Like it if it added value. Subscribe if you want more content on the psychology of thinking, decision-making, and the deep analytical tools that aren't taught in standard curriculums. Leave a comment below. What is one decision you are currently facing where this kind of framework could change your approach? I read every single one. Disclaimer: this content is for educational and informational purposes only. References to intelligence agencies, historical events, and psychological frameworks are presented for illustrative purposes and do not represent any classified or insider information.